tastes healthy.
Why is it spicy?
So we are drinking the Honest Organic Tea Golden Turmeric Pineapple Herbal Tea today.
That's
and
a
you can
mouthful.
really taste the fact there are only 25 calories in this bottle.
God, fuck
There
right
is
here.
no sweetener to speak of. It is intense. It is similar to golden milk, but golden milk often has like agave syrup or honey or maple syrup or something mixed in.
I don't know what golden milk is.
Mm.
If you listen closely, you can actually hear the sound of
I think it's supposed to be
cat.
anti-inflammatory, but yeah, it doesn't taste very good. I like how they describe it as a rich taste that makes it almost as good as gold. It doesn't.
For everyone that missed it, as Joel cut me off, if you listen closely, you can hear our cat munching in the background, so he will also be joining us today. Bean, say something.
Hi, kids.
That was so creepy.
Naomi, what are your highs and lows for the week?
Joel, what the fuck are we doing here? Hi, I'm Naomi Guy, and that's Joel Guy, and welcome back to Why Will No One Date These Guys? A dating podcast, exploring dating, sex, and relationships.
You know, we're on what, like episode 18 by now, and we still can't get that down?
Nope.
I think that
we
speaks
will.
to the fact
It's our
that
quirk.
we're more interested in giving high quality content to the masses than our branding.
It was our quirk.
I think by like episode 500, we'll have figured this out. We'll have a really good
Perfect.
intro. We'll have like a rap intro done by some relevant artist who definitely won't have been canceled. We'll have it'll be in 3 dimensions because that's going to be like 10 years from now. So every podcast will be 3D. There will be like smell-o-vision where you'll be able to smell the drinks that we're drinking each week. It's going to be pretty incredible. I'm excited for it.
Joel, what are we doing here today?
Today we are continuing our sex ed series where we're trying to give you the sex ed you never received in schools. And we're getting into the good stuff this time. The ins and outs of sex. Wink. Common myths. Male and women's sexual health. All that good stuff.
I think it's so funny because basically everyone that I know that is listening to this podcast has had sex / has a child / has several children. So we're just teaching sexual education to people that have already had sex because our school system sucks.
Well, let's be clear. I think even if you're an active adult who has, a sex life, even if you are raising children, that doesn't mean you have a good grasp of a lot of these things. It's similar to older adults who we've had conversations with in the past who have flat out been like, so what's this transgender trend anyways?
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's always an opportunity to learn more. And I think a lot of people go through life with inaccurate assumptions that may, give them anxiety or may cause them to ignore like serious health impacts. And it's worth like reiterating a lot of basic information for that reason alone. I think given that this is a relationship and sexual health podcast, it's really worth reiterating some of the basic fundamentals so where everyone is on the same page as we move into more advanced topics. It's similar to how a lot of colleges mandate like English 101, the most basic like writing style, because they want to make sure that students all have like a similar grasp of the English language. Yeah, I don't know if it's ideal, and in an ideal world, I think we wouldn't need this, but we're not in an ideal world. We're in Arizona. So Naomi, where do you want to get started on this topic?
Let's talk about the definition of sex, because I feel like a lot of people have different definitions of sex. Some people think that like holding hands or like kissing or like hugging or doing stuff like that is considered sex. Some people think that any action resulting in an orgasm is sex. Some people think that oral sex is sex. Some people think that when there's penetration, there's sex. Everybody has a different definition of sex. Some people refrain from any sort of sexual relationships until marriage, and that's called abstinence. The U.S. government promoted abstinence-only education and still does to this day, and that's why many schools do not have proper education. So let's talk about the basics, and we will try as hard as possible to give you a proper sexual educational experience, even though we're doing this via audio only.
Is it time to start a YouTube channel?
Oh, God. Maybe we should do both.
We should do both. Let's do one of those YouTube channels where we're recording a podcast, but we film the process of recording it.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Okay, but then people will see how like terrible our audio setup is. I mean, they can hear how terrible our audio setup is.
So As we go through this episode, what I did was, if you follow us on Instagram, which is @DateTheseGuys on Instagram, I have correlated what we're talking about with slides like a slideshow presentation that I put together on our Instagram. So if I'm talking about something like today, we're going to go into genitalia. When I talk about that, I'm going to say, refer to slide 1 of the slideshow. And so you'll get an audio visual representation of what we were talking about.
This is a silly question. Does any of that violate Instagram's terms of service?
I don't know, but we're about to find out.
It's the worst sound you've ever made.
When this episode comes out, we'll know. So, Joel, what do you think are the two most important things in any sexual interaction?
Candles that smell nice and cucumbers.
Okay.
That also smell nice.
So
Cucumber water, more specifically.
So the 2 C's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm heavily reminded of the time that I had to study Arizona history, and they taught us about the 5 C's.
What are the 5 C's, Naomi?
Cotton, cattle, clouds,
Climate, copper, and citrus.
There we go. Okay. So the 2 C's that I came up with for having a very good sexual experience is condoms and consent. If you want to know more about consent, we have a full episode talking about consent, and look it up on any of the platforms that you're streaming on.
I will slightly push back because I think more important than condoms is contraceptives.
Okay,
it's any
fair,
form of birth control.
And that is a good way of using your C. That's a great way of using your C.
There's a C somewhere in electrolytes, I'm sure, but make sure to drink some Gatorade afterwards.
So let's talk about condoms, because that's a form of contraception. So with this, I want you to please reference picture number 1 in the slideshow. Joel, where can you get condoms?
I got a guy, Jimmy, down the street.
Ew, that sounds like a slimy name.
Jimmy is a slimy name. Sorry for all of our Jimmy listeners. I apologize. We'll make a donation to a charity that gives help to kids
Jimmy's
named Jimmy.
only.
Jimmy's of the world. You can find them, I guess, at a lot of stores, drugstores, pharmacies like CVS, Walgreens, grocery stores. I don't know if they sell them behind the counter. I don't know about, Walmart or Target, but I think
I actually have a funny
stores.
condom Walmart story.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, and then I guess you can also buy them online. I think you can get them significantly cheaper online, but pay close attention to the quality, because I'm not sure the same standards are applied if you're buying a 10,000 pack from Alibaba or whatever.
If you're getting, if you want a large pack, I would suggest going to Costco. They sell, pretty large packs for pretty cheap. They sell, Trojan variety packs at Costco for pretty cheap. Anyways, so my condom story at Walmart was my friend and I needed something from the same case that the condoms were in. And this was one of those Walmarts that has things that you need to unlock, get someone to unlock for you. So we're just waiting for this case to be opened, and we keep pressing the button that alerts someone that they need to attend to this specific aisle. And this guy comes up and he has 2 of the most giant sour cream containers I have ever seen in my entire life. I'm talking at least 2 feet tall, worth of sour cream. But he has 2 of them. And I was like, hey, how's it going? Trying to break the awkwardness, because you're standing in an aisle full
He's just standing next to you while you're waiting. Okay.
Yeah. And we're in the aisle, and I was trying to break the tension, and not tension, the awkwardness. And he's like, you know what, man? It's a pretty fucking great night. And he he's high as fuck. He's the coolest dreadlocks I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, okay. Some guy comes up and finally opens the case for us. And he was like, sir, what do you need? And he goes, can I get 2 Magnum condom variety pack? No, it wasn't variety pack. It was value size packs.
Value size. And
I was like, so what the fuck are you doing with sour cream and condoms on a Thursday afternoon?
Put sour cream in them and throw them at cars with an overpass. Come on, that's classic Arizona shenanigans.
So right before I left, I was like, you know what, man? Have a great fucking night. And he was like, you too. That was my condom experience. So anyways,
beautiful. Back
to where we can get condoms. Your local community health center.
Near the deodorant in Walgreens. Buy both. They're next to each other for a reason.
Planned Parenthood, your university health center, your local drugstore, grocery stores, Target, Costco. You can go like buy them on Amazon Prime or GoPuff if you need them like in a hurry.
No joke. Like, you can just stop by your local college's health center and probably grab a bunch.
Yeah.
You don't even need to be attending that. No, I'm sure they strongly discourage that behavior, but I'm not going to let that stand in the way of good sexual health.
What they don't know won't kill them. Wow, I'm really getting bad at my words today.
Yeah, I mean, if tuition is $40,000 a semester, I'm sure they have a line item in the budget where they can afford to lose a couple condoms to non-students. Call me crazy.
Okay, so base price for condom as of Tuesday of this week for a 10-pack is $10.99. So per condom, average price of about 75 cents. That's in the United States. That's USD.
Well, now I'm wondering, Naomi, because you're giving the cost of condoms. What's the cost of giving birth in the United States?
Oh, damn. Hit me with some statistics.
I am looking that up now. In Arizona, the average price of giving birth is $19,000.93. Looks like it varies around the country. It could be as low as like $12,000, maybe as high as like $24,000. But yeah, condoms are cheaper than having kids. And that's not even accounting for, taking care of a kid for 18 plus years. So yes, condoms are not the cheapest thing in the world. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use them. It means you should probably weigh your options and come to the correct conclusion that if you don't want kids, condoms are the superior choice.
So what I'm going to say about this is we'll go into more detail when we talk about pregnancy in a future episode, but you want to wear a condom for one of two reasons. Both reasons. You want to wear a condom for both reasons. This is a great way to...
It will reduce the risk.
There we go. Wow, I really cannot speak today. It will reduce the risk of pregnancy, and it'll reduce the risk that you will get an STI or an STD. So let's now talk about where you put a condom on. Joel, hit me with it.
My dingling.
Perfect.
The entire time we've been doing research for this topic, I'm just thinking of that episode from The Simpsons where they have the talent show and the little kid comes out on stage and starts singing about his ding-a-ling. And he's referencing his musical instrument that he plays, but they consider it obscene and yank him off stage. My ding-a-ling.
Perfect. And women can also wear it on their ding-a-ling.
Well, okay, let's be clear. When we're talking about condoms, we're primarily talking about condoms that you place on your or your partner's penis. There are condoms for women that go inside the vulva, inside the vagina.
Please reference slide 2.
There are finger condoms, too, that go over your fingers and are meant for interacting with parts of your partner's body if there is a case of STI transmission. There are more than one type of condoms. We are primarily discussing the most commonly used type of condom, which is the penis condom. So yes, you put it on your penis, your ding-a-ling, as the kids say. Naomi, do you want to talk about this, or should I take over?
Hit me with it.
Okay, so...
Okay, please don't hit me with it.
We're cutting that out. Someone's going to do like a best of compilation of our podcast at some point, and that's going to be a big part of it.
Every time I tell people that I do a sex, relationship, and dating podcast with my brother, they just automatically start singing Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh, Jesus. I would have assumed they'd want to talk about other things. But okay, so if you are someone who is biologically identified as male, and we're going to get into this a little further in the episode about the difference between sex and gender, you most likely have a penis and scrotum. There are two parts of the male external sex anatomy. Your penis is an organ made of 3 layers of spongy tissue. When people get aroused, and even sometimes when they don't get aroused, mostly when they get aroused, blood fills these tissues. This increases the pressure inside the layers of tissue, causing a penis to get harder and stand up, which is also called getting an erection. So Naomi put this in, and I'm going to disagree with it. She says the average size of an adult erect penis is 5 to 7 inches long. And this is something that I've read a lot about over the years for different reasons, mostly morbid curiosity.
This is statistics from Planned Parenthood that I used from their website.
Okay, well, they've been...
national average for the United States.
Okay, the big thing about penile measurements is a lot of studies are based on self-reporting. And it turns out men are very likely to exaggerate how long they say that their penis is, perhaps because they feel psychologically insecure, or maybe because they just like messing with statistics. But when you do meta-analyses of studies that are based off of researchers actually measuring, which is a really weird job to have, but all good to you, such as Veal et al., a study that was published in December 2014 called Am I Normal? A Systematic Review and Construction of Nonograms for Flaccid and Erect Penis Length and Circumference, they found that the average was 5.17 inches. That is a number that's mimicked in a lot of other studies. I'm trying to pull that up right now. Yeah, 5.17 to 5.35 inches is considered the average around the world. 90% of all sizes fall within 1 percentile of that measurement. So it's a very consistent measurement. There's very little variation. Obviously, there are billions of people in the world, so there can be pretty significant variation on either direction. But yes, most men fall into the category of quote-unquote normal. There's been a lot of research on this, and there's very little evidence that certain parts of your anatomy being bigger makes you have a larger penis. There's no relationship between, for instance, the size of one's feet and their recorded penis length.
Or the size of one's hands or gloves.
The size when it's flaccid doesn't really relate at all to the size when it's hard. Some people are, as they say, growers, not showers. But yeah, some do get bigger, others stay perhaps the same size. But yes, if anyone is ever concerned that the size of their penis or that of their partner is inadequate, reference the fact that most people's are 5.17. Again, because sex is composed of a lot of different activities, even if you do have or your partner has one that falls well below average, there's still plenty of ways to enjoy yourself. It's not the end-all be-all if you do not have what is considered a quote-unquote average penis. But all penises do have the same primary parts. So there is the glands.
Hold on, before you go into this, I would like to say if you would like a visual representation of what Joel's about to say, please reference slides 3 and 4.
I'm really picturing someone in their car driving down the freeway, like frantically shuffling through their phone, being like, oh crap, what does it look like? I have no idea. This is all foreign to me. I have no idea what's going on. So the main part is the glands. It's called the head or the tip. That is where the opening of the urethra is. That is where pre-ejaculate and semen comes out. It's also where most people pee out of. For most people, it's the most sensitive part. The shaft of the penis extends from the tip to where it connects to your lower belly. It looks very much like a tube, and your urethra is contained inside the shaft. Your urethra is the tube that connects all the bits together. The foreskin is a patch of skin that covers and protects the head. It gets hard, it's pulled back, and the tip is exposed. Sometimes the foreskin is circumcised soon after birth, so not everyone has it. So this is something that I don't know if we want to get into. There's a lot of people who have very strong opinions on whether or not you should remove foreskins. In my opinion, it is very similar to FGM, female genital mutilation. It's definitely not as extreme, but it's the same idea of mutilating a child's genitals so that they appear quote-unquote more normal. I believe there's been a significant amount of research into this field, and very little evidence has emerged that there's actually any health benefits or cleanliness benefits to removing it. It's also where most of the nerves of the penis are contained, so you're basically taking away the most pleasurable part, which if you're a culture that heavily prizes purity and abstinence may be desirable, but I think is not desirable by perhaps the person who formerly had it on. So we're not going to endorse an official position, but yes, just because a activity such as circumcision is considered normal doesn't mean that you as a parent have to continue that tradition. So other external parts. Oh, I'm sorry. There is also the frenulum. The frenulum is the little bit where the foreskin meets the underside of the penis. It looks like a small V just below the head. Part of it remains after circumcision, and for many people, it's very sensitive. That is also where a lot of penis-related injuries can come from, when that can snap or break. Hey, I'm the one who would actually have to deal with that. But yes, be careful with that if you're playing around with it.
Be careful with that.
Other external parts include the scrotum, aka the ball sack, is the sack of skin that hangs below your penis. It holds the testicles and keeps them at the right temperature. If it's too cold, it pulls the testicles closer to your body, and if it's too warm, they hang away from your body. So I don't have the proper scientific background here, but it is my understanding that in order for semen to be kept viable, it has to be at a, am I correct, lower temperature than your average body temperature. It can't be as hot as the average temperature of your body.
But they froze semen.
That's a really good question.
Because I thought they froze it, and so you can't hold on.
Well, no, that tracks, because if it gets too hot, it goes bad. But I would assume if it stays cool, that may be fine. And that may be for limited periods of time. I don't know the specifics on that.
Yeah, you freeze it.
Okay, well, you can freeze human beings and allegedly revive them at some point in the future. Same with blood. I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist, but from what I understand, the whole evolutionary reason that that's on the outside of your body is to keep it separate from the rest of your body and better regulate the temperature. Some animals keep the ball sack inside the body, some don't, but humans are kind of special in that regard. So scrotums can be big or small. Sometimes they can have a little or a lot of hair. Some of them can vary in color. Some are larger on one side than the other. The scrotum is super sensitive. Any hitting or twisting is extremely painful. Gently touching is preferred. Yeah, there was a kid in high school who loved just punching people in the dick. That was fun. He would go up to people and be like, hey, you know what the capital of Thailand is? And some people would be not get it. Some people were smart enough to avoid it. And others, like myself, on one occasion were like, oh, that's Bangkok. And he just punch you in the dick. So
how did he get away with that?
There is no justice in the universe, Naomi.
Yeah, apparently not.
And then the last kind of part of the overall outside male genitalia is the anus. It's the quote-unquote butthole. It's the opening to the rectum. It has lots of sensitive nerve endings, so some people do experience sexual pleasure from anal stimulation. So what are the internal parts composed of? Well, the internal parts of the male sex anatomy are made of the testicles, balls, two ball-like glands in your scrotum. They make sperm and hormones like testosterone. So if you ever wondered where testosterone comes from, the testicles are a big source of it. There's also the epidemis. The epidemis is a tube where your sperm matures. It connects each testicle to the vas deferens, and it holds your sperm before you ejaculate. There's also the vas deferens, which is a long, narrow tube that carries sperm from the epidemis to the seminal vesicles when you ejaculate. There are two of them, one connected to each epidemis. There's also the seminal vesicles, two small organs that produce semen, the fluid that sperm moves around it. They're located below your bladder. Finally, there is the prostate gland, the Cowper's glands, the urethra, and the cremaster. The prostate gland is the fluid. It makes a fluid that helps your sperm move. It's about the size of a walnut or golf ball, and it's sensitive to pressure or touch in a way that many people find pleasurable. There's the Cowper's glands, which produce a fluid called pre-ejaculate. This fluid prepares your urethra for ejaculation. It reduces friction so semen can move more easily. The Cowper's glands are under the prostate and attached to your urethra. The urethra is the tube that carries urine, pre-ejaculate, and semen to your urethral opening and out of your body. And finally, the cremaster is the muscle that moves your scrotum and testicles closer to your body, happening when you're cold, you're aroused, or when someone touches your inner thigh. Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't know much about sexual anatomy because there's a lot of parts, and each plays a pretty specific role. That's not to say it's the most efficient way to reproduce, and I think if you think about it, it's really weird that all genitalia has the options for reproduction and defecation in very close proximity, which, I don't know, that's how evolution worked out. But no, it's pretty impressive how it all interacts. And I think if you understand we are descended from animals, according to Darwin's theories, I don't know if those have caught on in vogue yet.
Somebody in high school told me that they didn't believe in evolution.
Good. I don't believe in them. Suck it. But no, if we're descended from animals, you can clearly see the reason that, reproduction evolved, the reason that, certain elements of humans differ and are similar to other animals. It's not crazy to, understand that this is pretty common in the animal kingdom. I don't know. I will say this. If I could reproduce asexually, that'd be pretty cool. Just split in half into identical Joels of, half the size, mini-me versions, just run off giggling.
I was at a function yesterday, and this guy walks outside, and it looked like his mini-me was right next to him. This guy was, 3 feet shorter than the guy that was standing next to him. Full-grown men, but it was just miniature version.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah.
If I had a friend who looked kind of like me, I'd try to coordinate our dress all the time.
Actually, I have a guy in my class that sort of looks like you. His name's Lance.
Let's not leak anybody's personal information. I don't want any of our listeners tracking down, let's call him Blaze, at any point in the future.
Blaze.
Yeah, whoever's editing this podcast, please substitute the word Lance for Blaze. That's very important to us.
Oh my god.
You can even, here's a clean sound clip, Blaze. You can use that.
Joel, give me some male health concerns that are in reference to male genitalia.
Well, I'll say this. Here's more of my 2 cents. I think a lot of men either are too embarrassed to talk about health concerns that they have, or obviously in the United States healthcare system, too poor to afford getting doctor's appointments to look into things. I think everybody, regardless of gender, sex, background, should make it a priority to, get health checkups, but I also recognize that's not always something that can be done. So here are a couple of basic things that can happen to men. If any of this sounds similar to things you're experiencing, definitely get it checked out if you can. There are free clinics around the United States. Check out free clinics in your area. Again, a lot of colleges have health centers where even if you're not a student, you can get discounted, assessments by either practicing physicians or students. So male health concerns, erectile dysfunction, the inability to get and keep an erection for enough for sex. A lot of guys put a lot of importance onto sexual performance, specifically in regards to maintaining an erection. Given that sex is typically a fairly quick act in the animal kingdom, the idea that you will be able to maintain hardness for more than, say, 15 minutes is kind of crazy, especially if you know how quick other animals have sex. But yes, that's something that a lot of men prize in our society. Again, keep in mind there are multiple forms of sex. If this isn't something that you can sustain, there are also medications and drugs that can help you with that. But yeah, it's pretty common. A lot of men suffer issues relating to that. There's also ejaculation problems, including the inability to ejaculate, premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, painful ejaculation, reduced ejaculation, retrograde ejaculation, and a very gross form where semen enters the bladder instead of emerging through the penis. I think some of those can be corrected through surgery. I think some of them can be corrected through different medication. Again, it's something that's pretty common in normal amount of men. Don't feel bad if this is something you experience. There's anorgasmia, the inability to achieve an orgasm despite adequate stimulation. Your inability to speak today has been passed on to me. That can be, something that can be resolved through therapy. It can also be a physical condition. Decreased libido and a reduced desire for sex. That can be related to a number of things and is perfectly normal. It can be related to depression. It can be relating to stress in the workplace. It can be related to low testosterone levels. It can also be perfectly normal. There's perfect reasons you can refuse sex. Don't feel that you're less of a man, less masculine if you're uninterested in sex at any given moment in time. But if that was an important part of your life and for whatever reason you have reduced desire for sexual activity, maybe get that checked out. Sexually transmitted infections, including genital warts, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, and genital herpes. These can cause painful urination, penis discharge, and sores or blisters on the penis or in the genital area. So yes, this is why you use birth control. This is why you use condoms. This is why you use multiple forms of protection when having sex with people. This is also why it's good if you are having sex with someone to get a clean STI test with them beforehand. Obviously, that doesn't work out too well with one-night stands unless you both happen to carry a copy of a recent STI test in your wallet. I think, honestly, that should be more common practice if you plan to smush ginnies together with someone.
Or go out on the first day, get rapid STI tests.
But yes, get that stuff checked out. These are perfectly normal conditions. A significant portion of the population has some form of STI, but they are things that can be treated, that can go away, that their pain can be mitigated, and you can even get rid of a lot of them entirely. There's also yeast infections, slightly less common in men than in women, but they can cause inflammation on the head of the penis, a reddish rash, white patches on the penis, itching or burning, and a white discharge. Get that checked out. Crohn's disease, a chronic condition involving the development of abnormal scar tissue inside the penis, often resulting in bent or painful erections. That's the first time I've heard of it. And that sounds horrible. I think that's something that could be corrected with surgery. Yeah, definitely talk to a doctor about that. Penile fracture, rupture during the erection of the fibrous tube-like tissue in the penis, usually caused by an erect penis forcefully striking a female pelvis during sex. Priapism, a persistent and usually painful erection that isn't caused by sexual stimulation or arousal. Phimosis, a condition in which the foreskin of the uncircumcised penis can't be retracted from the penis head, causing painful urination and erections. We were talking about removing the foreskin earlier, and that's one of the things that allegedly is meant to be resolved. At the same time, though, you can still maintain your foreskin and have phimosis corrected, so don't feel that you need to remove the foreskins in order to address it. There's also paraphimosin, a condition in which the foreskin can't be returned to its normal position after being retracted. And then finally, penile cancer, which may begin as a blister on the foreskin, head or shaft of the penis, and become a wart-like growth that discharges watery pus. Charming.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of advice given to women about preventing breast cancer. They suggest frequent mammograms. They suggest when in the shower checking for lumps that weren't there before. Guys, same goes for you. If you are in the shower washing up, make sure that every so often you give your genitals a good rub down. Try to get a good idea of what's considered normal and start talking to doctors if you can afford that, or looking up whether or not it's something to be concerned about online. I do think a lot of guys don't take care of themselves in the same way that women do, even if they can afford doctor's appointments. Guys, it's very attractive if you're looking out for yourself. It indicates you plan to stay in the world long term. I think women are attracted to that. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Naomi, where you're going to educate everyone about women's genitalia.
Please reference slide 5 and 6 at this point.
Wow, the way of the future right here.
The way of the future. So let's talk about female genitalia. People who were born as biological females.
This is also the title of our podcast now. Let's talk about female genitalia.
We should have started the episode with, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you. Okay, never mind. Anyways, so the vulva is the part of the genitals on the outermost of the body, your labia, clitoris, vaginal opening, and the opening of your urethra, the hole you pee out of. While vaginas are one part of the vulva, many people say vagina when they really mean the vulva, but the vulva has a lot more going on than just the vagina. No two vulvas look exactly the same, but they're made up of the same basic parts. So some vulvas are large and fat, and some are small and skinny. There's actually like a trend going around where people ask like if you have like a small vagina. Anyways, so labia. It's the lips. They are the folds of the skin around your vaginal opening. The labia majora, the outer lips, are usually fleshy and covered with pubic hair. The labia minora, inner lips, are inside your outer lips. Wow, that's a mouthful. They begin at your clitoris and end at the opening of your vagina. The labia can be short or long, wrinkled or smooth. Often one lip is longer than the other. They also vary in color from pink to brownish. Color of your labia can change as you get older. Some people have large outer lips than inner lips, and many have longer inner lips than outer lips. Both are sensitive and swell when you're turned on. The clitoris. Tip of the clitoris, aka the glands, are located at the top of the vulva where your inner lips meet. Everyone's is a different size. It can be small as a pea, or as big as a thumb. The tip of the clitoris is covered by the clitoral hood. This is the beginning of the clitoris, and it extends inside your body, back and down on both sides of the vagina. This part is called the shaft or the crura, roots and legs, and is about 5 inches long. Your clitoris is made of spongy tissue that becomes swollen when you're aroused or turned on. It has thousands of nerve endings, more than any other part of the human body, and its only purpose is to make you feel good. The opening of the urethra. The urethral opening is a tiny hole that you pee out of, located just below your clitoris. The opening of the vagina. The vaginal opening is right below your urethral opening. It's where the menstrual blood leaves your body and babies are born through the vaginal opening. A variety of things can go inside your vagina, like fingers, penises, sex toys, tampons, and menstrual cups. Oh, they forgot to say forms of contraception can go in there. Anyways, anuses.
Sure.
We'll talk about that in our birth control and pregnancy episode. Anuses.
Can't wait.
Well, we already went over the anus in the first part. Let's talk about the mons pubis. The mons is the fleshy mound around your vulva. After puberty, it's covered with pubic hair and it cushions your pubic bone. The vagina is a tube that connects your vulva around with your cervix and uterus. It's what babies and menstrual blood leave your body through. It's also where some people put penises, fingers, sex toys, menstrual cups, and or tampons. Your vagina is really stretchy and expands when you feel turned on. The cervix. The cervix divides your vagina and uterus located below the two. It looks like a donut with a tiny hole in the middle. This hole connects your uterus and your vagina. It lets menstrual blood out and sperm in. Your cervix stretches open, dilates during childbirth. You can also feel your cervix at the end of your vagina if you insert your fingers, a penis, or a sex toy into your vagina. Your cervix separates your vagina from the rest of your body, so things like tampons and other objects can get lost inside of you. Actually, I've heard of people having tampons get lost inside of them. That's scary.
Wonderful. This is the type of content our listeners listen for.
The uterus is a pear-shaped muscular organ about the size of a small fist. It's sometimes called the womb, but it's where a fetus grows during pregnancy. Because during sexual arousal, the lower part of your uterus lifts towards your belly button. That's why your vagina gets longer when you're turned on. It's called tenting. The fallopian tubes are two narrow tubes. They carry eggs. I was about to say legs. They carry eggs from your ovaries to your uterus. Sperm travels through them to fertilize your egg. The fimbriae looks like tiny fingers at the end of each fallopian tube. When your ovary releases an egg, they're swept into your fallopian tube. The ovaries store your eggs. They produce hormones, including estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Yes, women also produce testosterone. These hormones control things like your period and pregnancy. During puberty, your ovaries start to release an egg each month. Then they do so until menopause. Sometimes your ovaries release more than one egg. The Bartholin's glands are near your vaginal opening. They release fluid that lubricates your vagina, makes it wet when you're turned on. The Skene's glands are on either side of your urethral opening. They release fluid during female ejaculation. They're also called paraurethral glands or female prostate glands. The hymen is a thin, fleshy tissue that stretches across part of the opening of the vagina. Hymens vary a lot in how much your vagina opening they cover, and they can sometimes, but not always, tear and cause bleeding the first few times that you put anything into your vagina. Go ahead.
You want to talk about that?
I was going to talk about that, but you can go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of myths about the first time people have sex. There's a lot of cultures that place a lot of importance on women bleeding during sex, which is kind of fucked up if you think about it.
The first time they have sex, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, the hymen can break during women's childhood doing normal everyday things.
Riding a horse.
Riding a horse. Riding a bicycle. On the jungle gym.
Sitting down. Peeing.
Sitting down. If they have any kind of medical problems and they need surgery, it can break during men.
Taking a poop.
It's not a great predictor of anything in that regard. Just because someone has a broken hymen does not mean they are not a quote-unquote virgin. It's also important to realize that it is a fleshy tissue, which means it can stretch, which means that it doesn't even have to break during the first time you have sex. So just because someone has an intact hymen doesn't mean they haven't not had sex. So it's not a useful predictor either way outside of old cultural mores and wives' tales. Yeah, if you're someone who places a great deal of importance on virginity, you can't really trust anything outside of whether or not the person says, yeah, I've had sex or not. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. What did you have to say?
All I was going to say is that in some cultures, they put such a great importance on if the hymen is broken or not on the first night of marriage that sometimes the mothers or women relatives of the woman who has gotten married will carry sheep's blood with them and pour sheep's blood onto the sheets and show all the relatives after the first you consummate. Once the couples have consummated the marriage.
Nice.
So just keep in mind that that's not a great indicator. And like Joel said, there's no real way of indicating if someone has lost their virginity. But also, I'd like to say that everyone has a different definition of losing their virginity. Some people can define it as, yes, there's a penis inside me, or yes, there was fingers or something like that inside me. And other people think that you haven't lost your virginity until you've slept with someone that you loved. So also keep that in mind and make sure that if you're talking to someone and you put an importance on that sort of thing in your relationship, that you define what you are talking about when you say sex.
And it's also completely fine if you don't consider it important at all. If you're first time I had sex, yeah, cool, we had in and out afterwards. Yeah, if you don't consider it a big deal, that's perfectly acceptable too. You don't need to be someone who cherishes it. It's okay if you consider it important. It can be a big life milestone, like a 16th birthday, buying your first car, moving into your first apartment. It can be something you consider as symbolic of, adulthood. Just recognize why it's important to you and not just because other people in your life deem it important.
So the last major part of the female genitalia that I want to talk about is the G-spot, or the Grafenberg spot. I didn't even know it stood for the Grafenberg spot. It's located a few inches inside your vagina on the front wall. Your G-spot can swell when you're turned on. Some people like the feeling of having their G-spot touched. Some sexual problems
let's back up just a second.
Okay.
So, we spoke a little bit earlier about how sexual organs are complicated.
Yeah.
There are a lot of organs and tissues that have been methodically arranged and changed over billions of years of evolution. And to some extent, they're still not well understood. I think they're much better understood than they were, say, 500 years ago. But there's still a lot of things that scientists are confused about and not they haven't made up their minds yet. One thing is the G-spot. There is a lot of disagreement about whether or not it exists. There tends to be general agreement that, yes, women find it pleasurable to be stimulated there. It's unclear if that's due to other organs being in close proximity or it being its own independent organelle. What is agreed upon is that most people didn't consider it to even exist until the 1980s. And so, even in the modern era, there's still discoveries being made. Similarly, there was a lot of disagreement among researchers about how conception even starts. And I've heard more recent theories that the egg has some ability to choose which sperm it accepts during sex. And
you're like a whale.
I don't understand that.
Whales have trapdoors in their vaginas, and so they can decide if they have a child.
Yeah, so originally it was thought that the most powerful sperm was the one that got to inseminate the egg, which I'm sure is tied to some really weird ideas about masculinity. But now it's thought that the egg actually has the ability to slightly choose which sperm it wants to be impregnated by. The point I'm trying to make is that's not even solidified. That is still just a theory, but there's still a lot of arguments being made by reputable researchers about sexual health and correcting a lot of the myths from the past. So a lot of this field is still open to debate, still open to argumentation, and research can still come along to correct, prior misconceptions we had in the past. And that's going to be relevant in just a few minutes. But keep that in mind when hearing anything about sexual health, news stories, scientific articles. There can still be a lot that's discovered or corrected moving forward. So let's talk about women's sexual problems.
Sexual problems that women have. They might include persistent or recurrent pain just before, during, or after sex. It's also called I don't know how to say that.
Dyspareunia.
There we go. Pain during penetration might be caused by involuntary spasms of the muscle of the vaginal wall, vaginismus. The muscles in the pelvic floor can become tense, causing chronic pain and pain during intercourse. Vaginal dryness, often occurring during menopause, can also cause pain during intercourse. So something that I want to talk about is antidepressants and some forms of contraception make it so that your vagina is dry. Actually, different forms of medication cause vaginas to be dry during intercourse. So if this occurs, please pick up some lube at your local drugstore or Target or Costco.
Get a 55-gallon drum on Amazon.
Fascinations, anything like that. And make sure that your partner is comfortable while you guys are having sexual intercourse, while you are penetrating your partner. Because
if it involves the vagina.
Yes, because, actually, if it involves the anal cavity as well, you want to use lube.
Sure.
Sexually transmitted infections, Joel went over. Vaginitis is an infection or change in the normal balance of your vaginal yeast and bacteria that can cause inflammation of the vagina or vaginitis. Symptoms include vaginal discharge, odor, itching, and pain. Common types of vaginitis include bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, and
trichomoniasis.
There we go.
You could tell we don't have medical degrees.
Pelvic floor relaxation is the supporting ligaments and connecting tissues that hold the uterus and the vaginal wall in place becomes weak. The uterus, bladder, and rectum of the vaginal walls might slip down, called prolapse. This might cause urine leakage during coughing and sneezing or a bulge in the vagina. This can actually occur after someone gives birth, so be aware of that. Another reason why I don't want to have children.
Oh, you like your organs on your inside?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Vaginal cysts. These are other rare conditions. Vaginal cysts can cause pain during sex and make it difficult to insert a tampon. Vaginal cancer might first occur as vaginal bleeding after menopause or sex. Also is a rare possibility. Something I want to talk about before we move on is the fact that sexually transmitted infections, we'll get into this in another episode because this is literally like a whole episode within itself.
Guys, we're going to be milking this content for years. It's great.
Exactly. Sexually transmitted infections and diseases can be transmitted a lot of different ways. So even if you are using forms of contraception, let's just say a woman's condom, a male's condom, anything like that, STDs, STIs can still be transmitted through saliva, or if you're sharing blood, or if you're, I don't know why you'd be sharing blood during sex, but
I go on all the vampire dating sites.
If you're having oral sex, that can transmit things. So just be very aware that you want to be consistently getting tested, you and your partner. If you guys are seeing other people, it's a good idea to get tested very regularly.
Let's not be too facetious here. There are lots of easy ways you can transmit blood to a partner. If you have a pimple or a cyst or some kind of lesion on the inside of your mouth that breaks, you can transmit blood and saliva to somebody.
A blister.
If you've been shaving your genital area and you cut yourself, that's a very easy way for blood to be transmitted. If you were doing yard work and you have an
The world
wound,
is scary, and Joel's just trying to tell you how scary it is.
I'm saying be careful. There are lots of ways blood can be transmitted. It's not the end of the world. There are lots of interactions medical professionals have with blood on a daily basis that don't end in transmission of diseases, but also do be mindful. Naomi, before we move forward, I think we need to talk about transgender individuals because this is something that I think is often misunderstood. So the past two sections were primarily about individuals who have male or female identifying genitalia. We recognize there are individuals who have penises who identify as female and individuals who have vaginas who identify as male. There are also hermaphroditic individuals, those whose genitals fall between what we would consider to be the two primary categories of penises and vaginas. Yes, we recognize they exist, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Basically, everyone's sexual anatomy is a little bit different. There are pretty common threads, but each person's genitals are uniquely their own, kind of like a fingerprint. Obviously, genital prints are a little more awkward to take. A lot of people don't feel like their assigned sex at birth is necessarily the correct one. And the reason for that is sex and gender identity are completely different things. So I want to make sure I explain this properly because this is a difficult concept. It's simple in theory, but difficult if you're coming from the perspective that men are men and women are women. Basically, when we talk about the word sex, we refer to a set of biological attributes that people have. This is true of humans, it's true of animals, it's true of basically every species that doesn't produce with asexual reproduction. It's primarily associated with physical and physiological features, including chromosomes, gene expression, hormone levels and function, and reproductive and sexual anatomy. It's usually categorized as female or male, but there is variation in the biological attributes that comprise sex and how those attributes are expressed. Now, keep in mind, and I brought this up in a previous episode, that not everybody has obvious sexes. About 1 in 1,666 births have chromosomes that are not XX and not XY. Klinefelter syndrome, XXY chromosomes occur in 1 in every 1,000 births. Androgen insensitivity syndrome, 1 in 13,000 births. Vaginal agenesis, 1 in 6,000 births. Ovitestes, 1 in 83,000 births. Basically, 1 in 100 people have genitalia or biological sex characteristics that don't match what we would consider average. They differ from the standard male or female presenting ones. So there's actually a very large percentage of the population who already have variation in their genitals. So it's not crazy to understand that even saying the word biological sex, you are implying there are more than 2. There are 2 primary categories, but there are arguably up to 5 in between those categories, even more depending on how far you want to extend the definition. So sex is already something that's not solidly set in stone. It's primarily male and female, but there is some variation there. Now, if you accept that sex refers to biological attributes, I think it's pretty easy to also accept that gender refers to socially constructed attributes. So I have a penis. That does not mean that I need to lift weights or drive monster trucks or go to baseball games and drink lots of beer. Those are things we might consider to be male features. It's not to say women can't do them. I would say, however, those are characteristics in society more commonly associated with men. Gender influences how people perceive themselves and each other, how they act and interact, and the distribution of power and resources often in society. It exists often along a continuum, and this is something I think people can understand. There's a whole concept of tomboys, women who act very masculine and aggressive. They are still biologically women, but they act in a way that we might associate more with male characteristics. That is, aggression, playing lots of sports, cutting their hair short, having characteristics we might associate with masculine. There's also feminine males. I think often those are assumed to be gay individuals, but I know there's a lot of people in theater, for instance, who are flamboyant and emotional and identify completely as heterosexual. So gender exists on a continuum, and it's something that varies not only within our own culture, but also across cultures and times. So one thing that I think a lot of people forget is that everybody used to dress in long dresses. There are photos of former presidents like FDR in big dresses, big fluffy dress. There's really no other word to use but dresses, big fluffy bundles of cloth that the kid would run around in. They grow out their hair, and it's very difficult to tell with a quick glance at an old Victorian photo whether it was a boy or a girl you were staring at. Now, I've heard the reason for that was it made it a lot easier for parents to change diapers and for kids to go to the restroom.
That makes sense.
Turns out that kids have limited motor function, and so being able to pull down a pair of pants and put that back up is kind of difficult. So it's far more socially easy for them to just lift up a dress and do their business. But for whatever reason, like the culture was perfectly fine with men and women dressing the same. And so it's a really good example of gender being something that's not bound by specific immutable rules and something that can change over time. Because I think in the modern era, we would say wearing a dress is far more feminine than masculine. I think it's also worth reiterating that there's a lot of different genders outside of Western culture. And that's something that's often ignored, that we think that there's, kind of two primary identities, but other cultures have literally hundreds of different expressions for how biological men and biological women express themselves. So I have a cool map that I'll post on the Instagram, but I'll bring up a couple of examples. One example is a multiple gender tradition that existed in the Kanaki Maoli indigenous society in Hawaii. There was something called the mahu, which could be a biological male or female inhabiting a gender role somewhere between or encompassing both the masculine and the feminine. Their social role was to be educators and promulgators of ancient traditions and rituals. Unfortunately, they were basically eliminated by the invasion of Europeans. Another example is the lehamana from the Zuni tradition. It's known as two spirits, where a person lives as both genders simultaneously. They play a role in society as mediators, priests, and artists to perform both traditional women's work, pottery and crafts, as well as traditional men's work such as hunting. There was actually a fairly famous one called Wihua, who was a biological man who served as the Zuni ambassador to the United States, who spent 6 months in Washington, D.C., and a lot of people pursued this individual romantically without realizing that this was actually a biological male. They thought this person was female. It's unclear. I don't know how they wanted to be referred to, and that's something that's worth keeping in mind because a lot of people have, specific ideas about whether or not they want to be seen as masculine, feminine, or something in between. There's the Winkte, which is a Lakota word for two-spirit individuals who are born male but assume many traditional women's roles, such as cooking and caring for children, as well as assuming key roles and rituals and serving as the keeper of oral traditions of the tribe. There was the Guevedoche from the Dominican Republic. Genetics seems to have created a third sex in the Dominican Republic in the past. There was apparently a trait that was common in children discovered by ethnographers in the 1970s. These were children who had undifferentiated genitalia but were raised initially as girls, began developing male traits as puberty. And so instead of choosing one gender or another, they began to identify with a third gender called the Guevedoche, meaning testicles at 12, or the Machi Hembra, the man-women. Society accommodated the Guevedoche and constructed a third gender with distinctive roles for these individuals. So the point I'm trying to make is gender and cultural traditions surrounding gender can vary very significantly over times and places. There are cultures in Africa where women are considered the hunters and the tribal leaders. Especially true, I think, if you think about like Queen Cleopatra and a lot of the Egyptian dynasties. That's especially true in Asian cultures where a lot of women were seen as more intelligent. The Vikings thought that women were better at math because they thought math was kind of like a form of witchcraft, and women were better at witchcraft, so they needed to do all the calculations and finances. So this idea that gender is something that's like set solidly in stone is also kind of silly. And we've reiterated this point over and over again, but it's better to think of characteristics people have as existing on a spectrum rather than as a binary. The reason I'm saying all of this, the reason I'm explaining that sex is biological attributes and gender is socially constructed roles, is a lot of people, a significant portion of the population, somewhere between 1% and 3% of the population, doesn't think their biological sex and gender match. They may have been born as biologically male and have biologically male genitals, but identify more as female and a gender role. They may have been born as biologically female, and they may identify more as a male in terms of gender roles. And some people are fine keeping their genitals the same way, but others want to go through surgery because they find it's far easier to inhabit a gender role if they have the accompanying attributes, such as genitalia, that indicate to people that they are, in fact, a member of that specific gender. So transgender individuals exist. Again, 1% to 3% of the population is a pretty significant number. It's perfectly normal if you can accept that a lot of the characteristics surrounding how we perceive people's sex and identity are very immutable and change over time. And unfortunately, a lot of people find it really weird. And so transgender individuals suffer a lot of discrimination around the world and within the United States and within the state of Arizona. I don't know if I have anything else to really hammer home here. GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, describes transgender individuals as people whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. For transgender people, the sex they were assigned at birth and their own internal gender identity do not always match. Some transgender individuals refer to themselves as transgender, some as transsexual, some as non-binary. Those can mean very different things to very different people. So if someone says I'm one of these things, use that term rather than another. there's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of attempts to change the gender identity that people identify primarily with, and it really doesn't work. There are some really disgusting camps around the country, similar to like gay conversion camps, where they try to convince people that they are in fact biologically men or biologically women, and there's no other option. Keep in mind, there's a lot of different options for expressing your gender. You should not feel limited to one or the other. But yeah, it's really gross how transgender individuals are treated. Again, these are people who just identify in a certain way. They have a different belief about what society expects from them than what we might consider normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Some people go through hormonal therapy. Some people go through medical therapy. Some people just are fine the way they are. But yes, transgender people, cool. Naomi, anything you want to throw in there?
Not on that subject, no.
Okay. So we've talked about sex and gender identity. We've discussed, different biological organelles. You want to talk about pregnancy?
Let's save that for another episode. Something
Fair
I
enough.
do want to talk about, because that is seriously something that needs to have its own episode. Let's talk about some sex statistics. I pulled up some statistics.
10 sex statistics you won't believe. Oh, God,
We haven't played that game again.
Hmm?
We haven't played that game recently.
Okay.
Where you, say things.
I need to find some horrible misogynists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Average age of first intercourse by gender in the United States. Joel, what's your guess?
Well, I've already seen statistics. I think it's like 17 for both.
It's 16.8 years for males, and females it's 17.2 years.
Okay, that's interesting.
56% of American women and 66% of men report using a condom for their first time having sex.
Now, keep in mind, a lot of different ways to have sex.
Yes.
So that doesn't necessarily mean involve penetration at any point.
72% of females and 78% of male teenagers 15 to 19 years of age report condom use during first sex.
So that's good. That would
Yes.
indicate to me that younger generations are more informed and more willing to spend the money needed to stay safe.
More than half of women ages 18 to 49 reported masturbating during the previous 90 days. Rates were highest among those 25 to 29 and progressively lesser in older age groups. Approximately 1/3 of women in all relationships in the 60 to 69 year cohort reported recent masturbation. About 85% of men report that their partners had an orgasm at the most recent sexual event. This compares to 64% of women who report having an orgasm at their most recent sexual event.
Yeah, it doesn't mean necessarily that women are lying to their partners. I do think what it means is often the things that men consider marks of orgasms may not necessarily be accurate, and they don't have a good grasp on what gives their partners pleasure.
Yes. Men are more likely to orgasm when sex includes vaginal intercourse. Women are more likely to orgasm when they engage in a variety of sexual acts and when oral sex or vaginal intercourse is included. Among ages 18 to 59, older age of men is associated with lower likelihood of his own orgasm. For women, it's associated with a higher likelihood of her own orgasm. Age is not associated with the partner's orgasm for either men or women. Women are more likely to nearly always or always orgasm when alone than with a partner. However, women currently in a partnered relationship, 62% say that they are satisfied in the frequency or consistency of orgasm. 45% of participants considered performing manual genital stimulation to be having sex. 71% considered performing oral sex to be sex. 80.8% considered anal genital intercourse to be sex.
What's the other 19.2%? Christian teens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Abstinent individuals. A survey of adolescents aged 10 to 17 years old, internet users found 42% have been exposed to internet pornography in the last year, and 66% of those exposures reported as unwanted. How do you unwantedly come across?
Someone sends you dick pics?
That's very fair. Have you ever noticed that you could look up apple on Google Images, apples, like the fruit, and for some freaking reason you'd be scrolling through, it would be page 2 or 3, there's a pornographic image.
Thanks, Google. Making it easy. So this is interesting. In a national study, which I don't think you've cited here, 14% of people reportedly have used a sexually explicit website ever, and 25% of men reported visiting a pornographic site in the previous 30 days. 4% of women report visiting pornographic sites in the same time frame. Now, I recognize there are a lot of people in the United States who don't have internet. It's something crazy, like 20 to 30 million Americans don't have access to internet infrastructure, but that seems very low. Keep in mind, the reason there's so much research, I think, done into sexual activity is because there's a lot of people who lie. I think a lot of people have either a personal image to maintain, or they feel that the information that they're giving is not going to be treated anonymously and make up statistics that may not necessarily be accurate. So yeah, I don't know how much I trust that. This is some of the better research we've come across. That doesn't mean it's completely accurate. A lot of researchers will admit this in the paper that they write and say, look, we believe this may not be accurate for these reasons. But then often when a publication reports on it, they omit the researchers, 15 caveats. So take some of this with a grain of salt.
15% of men are estimated to have had sex with a prostitute.
Okay.
That's all I need to say.
Yeah.
Despite common conceptions of prostitution, only a minority of prostitutes work on the streets, 10 to 30%. I feel like we've talked about this in our prostitution episode. 69% of white males, 69, have had at least one experience with a prostitute.
I don't know if that math works out.
I don't think
what
it does
percentage
either.
of men are white? It's got to be like
a
third of the world's
What
men.
do they classify as white, though?
That's a fair question. I want you to dig more into this national survey of sexual health and behavior.
We have a few more categories. Same sex. Almost 3 times as many women, 17.4%, reported any same-sex contact in their lifetime compared to 6.2% aged 18 to 44 being men.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'm not going to butt in.
You had a line in there anyways. About 4 to 6% of men ever had same-sex contact. For women, the percentage who have ever had same-sex contact ranges from 4 to 11 to 12%, which does not make sense to me.
So a lot of this is coming from the National Center for Health Statistics. There is also some research coming from the Kinsey Institute. I think the Kinsey Institute is worth mentioning. Basically, there was a researcher, either Alfred or Albert Kinsey, who in the 1950s and 60s was like, wait, there's really not a lot of research on people's sexual habits done in the United States. I'm going to start interviewing just normal, everyday Americans to kind of get a better idea of sexual behaviors. Before this point, there was not a lot of good research. A lot of medical information was based off of kind of hearsay and assumptions by doctors. So he went and interviewed thousands of Americans. I think originally he did either 3,000 or 6,000 Americans of all ages about their sexual habits and preferences, and found some really shocking stuff, at least for the time, one of which was the high incidence of same-sex activity. A lot of people had reported that they had some kind of same-sex encounter. That's, including all manner of sexual activity. And then there was also a really high amount of sexual activity with animals. Something like 11% of people who were born on farms reported some kind of sexual activity with animals. But yeah, basically he was the first to kind of, broach the topic, and his report was one of the most purchased things in bookstores that year because it was considered, very raucous, and there's a lot of juicy details contained within it. But he kind of kicked off the whole field of researching human sexual activity, and a lot of the field owes credit to him to this day. I think the Kinsey Institute is still around. It's still doing a lot of research. It still maintains statistics on kind of people's sexual preferences, but it all started with, just one somewhat perverted guy interviewing thousands of people. Oh, he has a whole history I don't want to get into. But yes, it turns out that if you're someone in the 1950s and 60s who's willing to interview a bunch of people on sexual habits, you may also have a tendency to sleep with your students. Who would have thought? Anyways, Naomi, is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
I think that's all for today, kids.
Well, there was one thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is I'm behind on child support payments, and the judge may not let me leave the county until I'm caught up. That's right, it's the surprising and much desired return of Way Too Personal, the only free-range podcast game show where you get to guess the origin of my hand-selected Craigslist personal ads. This week I pulled some ads from the Phoenix area and New York for you to parse, Naomi. I felt limiting ourselves to Arizona was a bit too limiting. I'll read the title, full ad, and then you guess yay or nay. Greater than 50% correct, and you will win.
Yay or nay if they're real?
I guess you're right. New York or Phoenix, not yay or nay. This isn't a true or false. Okay, this was titled Adorable Waiter. You waited on my mom and I yesterday, then followed us into the parking lot to thank me for the tip. I am only in the area a few times a year, but you seem to have a bit of submissiveness to you that appealed to me. Let me know if you're interested in getting together the next time I'm in town.
I'm going to say Phoenix because New York doesn't have parking lots.
That's an interesting point. Boy, I might have given away the game. So this was called, the location was Portland, but on the map it was indicating Central Phoenix near the airport. So I'm going to say it was Central Phoenix. Very good, very good. So I've modified this title slightly because there is a regional thing. You are familiar that there is something called the 4 train in New York. So this ad was either called 4 train massive bulge or light rail massive bulge. Uptown 4 train. A guy with a massive bulge in his pants. If this is you, hit me up. I have seen you several times on the downtown light rail in the morning and on the uptown 4 in the evening. Send pics with first email. Let's connect on the low. Clean, discreet guy here.
I'm going to say that's New York, just because I don't feel like a large portion of the pop. Actually, it could be Phoenix, because sketchy people take the light rail and they use Craigslist.
Is that your final answer?
I'm going to say New York.
It is, in fact, New York. I probably should have rewritten the entire thing. It was Jerome Avenue in the Bronx. This title is The Truth. We were supposed to save each other from something. Now they can see what it it's too late. I fucked everything up and I might die for it. I wish I would have known before. That's the problem not having faith, though. When you can't trust in something greater than yourself, you can never be truly free. Now there's nothing left to say or do. I surrendered all to the universe. No more control. I am letting it all go. Phoenix or New York?
I'm going to go to New York.
Think of New York, city of 1,000 poets.
Think of New York.
I'm sorry, that was North Phoenix.
That is so weird.
It was weirdly poetic in a sea of very innocuous and slightly raucous ads. Okay, so you are 2-1. Doing good so far. Our ad is titled Prospect Park Boathouse. Our kids played together Friday afternoon. You wore a white dress. You are gorgeous. Want to meet again and be naughty?
You said Prospect Park Boathouse.
There are boats in Arizona.
There are, but I'm going to say that that's New York.
That is, in fact, New York. Boy, man, I need to cover these up a bit better. Grocery store on Thomas. You had a halter top and shorty shorts getting tortillas. You had a fun body. I was pushing the cart. Wife and I want to party with you and misbehave.
You said Thomas. I'm going to say
there
Phoenix.
Are also Thomas.
I'm going to say Phoenix.
You are correct. We're 4-1. I think you're taking this. Posted 3 or 4 years ago. We drank a good amount tequila together. Got turned. Wonder what's up.
How can you be so vague and get a response?
I think it's more of a therapeutic activity.
They're just like, I wonder what this person was up to.
I bet they're pining for me too.
God, this is an even draw. I'm going to go with New York.
That is Phoenix.
Damn
it. 4-2. Well, I believe you're taking this. Let's do one more. I miss my buddy Mike. I miss our time together. I miss having a manly daddy towel. You always reminded me how good I made you feel. I miss pleasing you. You commented I looked like the wrestler Stone Cold and looked younger than my big 6'0". But there is nothing cold about me and how we had such passionate times. You thought I was a contradiction since I am masculine yet have a somewhat submissive side. You just relaxing with a cold beer watching, parentheses, P-orn, while I did my all magic on you. It was good that I was only 2 stops from blank and blank. I'm not mentioning the specific locations this time.
I'm going to go New York.
That is New York. Naomi, you've gotten much better. That was 5-2?
Yeah.
5-2. That's very good. Is this the first one you've won?
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. That's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm noticing is Phoenix ads are not horny. Other cities, at least the ones I've looked at, are very horny.
LA, Portland,
New York. It could just be major cities.
Seattle.
It could just be cities with like large gay populations. I'm not sure. But yes, Phoenix, much more innocuous. It's like, I saw you in the parking lot. One guy was like, I was waiting at the bus stop and I was also trying to get a burger and you ran out with fries right as the door was closing. Let's hook up. True love and romance. Well, thank you for playing, Naomi. Thank you for playing Way Too Personal. I really need to find a site other than Craigslist that has more interesting posts, we'll say. Thank you so much for tuning in. To our listeners, I hope you have learned some valuable information you can apply in your day-to-day life. If there are questions you have about male or female sexual health, if there's specific information you are looking for, please feel free to comment on our Instagram post or email us at datetheseguys@gmail.com.
Or direct message us if you want it to be a little
Or send a passenger pigeon. If you want to send a cat with like a little message attached to his collar, that'd be pretty cool.
All I'm saying
is
that you can also look it up on Google. There's a lot of bad information out there, but there's also a lot of good information. So as long as it's coming from the Mayo Clinic or some sort of like certified website, then you'll be fine. Please don't come to us with your sexual issues.
Please don't send us pictures of your junk.
Please don't send us weird sexual issues that you're having with your partner. We hope you have a great week.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Please tell me you were recording.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at Date These Guys, or visit our website at datetheseguys.org. If you have questions you'd like us to discuss on the podcast or marriage proposals for either of us, shoot us an email at datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you're looking to make an impact, this show recommends giving either time or money to Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization that provides reproductive health care in the United States and globally. Planned Parenthood clinics and affiliates provide birth control and long-acting reversible contraception, clinical breast examinations, cervical cancer screenings, pregnancy testing, prenatal care, testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and abortions. Planned Parenthood also does great work for those who can't afford traditional medical services. Approximately 4 out of 5 of their clients have incomes at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. Both Joel and Naomi are monthly donors to Planned Parenthood. You could be too. The intro and outro music of Why Will No One Date These Guys is from the song Drop by the artist Ketsa. It is licensed through Creative Commons, and we are deeply appreciative that they've allowed us to use it.